Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. On today's show, we have Frank Agraz. Frank has worked in the energy lighting community for 25 plus years and serves as director of the C&I Engineering department at Ncqlp Engineering. He and his team develop turnkey lighting project opportunities, sounds a little bit like us, and provide technical and educational support to the customer. Prior to his current role, he co-founded Agraz Enterprises, a leading turnkey lighting retrofit provider. He serves on the Illuminating Engineering Society's board of directors as vice president. Mr. Agraz is lighting certified by the Ncqlp and is the outgoing exam committee chair. He is the outgoing exam committee chair. That's going to be fun. Responsible for the group that develops and maintains the content of the annual LC exam. We need to talk about that, I think, for a bit too. He graduated from Texas A&M University with a BS in industrial distribution. But folks, first we got to go light thing, right thing. Greg with the gangsters down at Satco, satco.com. I got to have a coffee here, but I'm messing everything up. Get fired up. Go to satco.com, light thing, right thing, Greggy.
That's right. So a lot of us lighting distributors, we're selling LED lighting. That's common. A lot of people request LED lighting, sure. And some manufacturers only have LED, but Satco has it all. And a lot of times people stop at LED. There's no reason to. With Satco, you can get a request for a decorative fixture, and guess what? They've got thousands of them.
Sure.
And it's easy to find, and they can help you narrow it down. You don't have to be a lighting designer, no offense, lighting designers, but to sell decorative fixtures. You can send a link to Satco, let the customer choose, sell the fixture, move on.
They got so much stuff too. They have occupancy sensors. Satco is just packed full of products for lighting distributors. So you got to go to satco.com, baby, satco.com. And of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Get associated, get educated. Come on down, nail.org. We got a convention coming out in November. You can sign up for that. Details to come. But for right now, Frank Agraz, what's happening, brother?
Hey, good morning, everybody. Happy to be here.
Yeah, Frank, we're excited to talk. We got a number of things here, but I'm just looking at, the first thing I want to know about the IES involvement. So you said before we started recording, you recently became the vice president?
Yes, so I've been involved with the IES Board of Directors as an at-large director for the last 4 years, and I was recently elected as the vice president, which is a one-year term. And as being a VP, you are also the president-elect. So I will step into the president's role next year in July 1st.
And who is the current president right
now? Right now it's Suzanne Settinger. And again, both the VP and the president roles are our one-year terms. And we are elected by our 8,000 member global community. And so it's an honor to be a part of the IES. I've been a member for over 20 years now, and kind of worked my way up through the ranks, becoming involved at the section level on the board there in Houston, and then becoming a section president. From there, within IES, there are levels at both the district and the region, and so I found myself on the board 4 years ago, and so I guess it was my turn to help lead our society in all of this era of change. There's a lot going on. As you know, the lighting library got released, and we've kind of blown up the way we view the lighting handbook, and have really made this digital transformation so that our members have access to documents. So don't want to steal any thunder, but there's a lot to unpack there. Things are moving at the IES, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
So one of the things, so we are part of an association, as you heard in the ad, NAILD, and we actually run the management committee that manages NAILD now. And one of the NAILD is very small compared to the IES. NAILD kind of is under that IES umbrella, right, where you have NALMCO, NAILD, NAED would be in there with ALA, and then kind of the IES kind of umbrellas over those, and we all kind of work together, as an industry, right? But NAILD's right. Doesn't have the scope of the IES, doesn't take on the projects and stuff that the IES does. But I find this 1 year president thing is so difficult to deal with. Like you're the president of NAILD. All of a sudden we get a couple programs going, and you're building relationships with other associations. You're building relationships with the industry. And now you got to transfer. You spend the first half of the year understanding what the person before you did. You'd spend the second half getting good at it, trying to get ready to hand it over to the next person. It's a momentum killer. And then that person may or may not be good. They happen to be the president-elect the year before and the treasurer the year before that. And so you just have this like way analog system of pushing people through these leadership positions. Even the secretary treasurer of the IES, or whatever you guys call it, the financial controller, or whatever you guys call it there. How do you get a handle on it? It takes you 6 months just to understand what the heck's going on. And then by the time now you're not treasurer anymore, now you're president-elect. Move on to the next position. Are these legacy governance models? Is it time to move away from those and have elections for 4 or 5 year terms as presidents of these kinds of associations, where people can get in there and really make a difference over a period of time?
From my experience, I found that the way IES does work, there is a little bit of kind of a moving train type of philosophy. The good news is most folks who are put into that vice president role, they are involved with leadership, many times at the board level before they get put into this role. And so, in my instance, I had been an at-large director for 4 years, sitting on the board. And if you do decide to take that jump, and if the board of nominations, will have you, it's now basically a 3-year commitment. One is VP, one is president, and then also a third is past president. So, I realize the president does have that 1-year term, but my personal involvement, I will have been in the board for 7 years by the time it's all said and done. Hopefully being able to pass the torch to, mentor and guide others as they come up through the ranks. But you do make a good point. It is tough when if you were to have a 1 year in and out, it's hard to really be effective. The good news is we do have a mechanism in place to support those as they go through the term.
Now, the IES has a number of excellent people working full-time for it. I know this is a volunteer role. Is that correct for you?
Yes. Yeah. Most everyone within the IES is in a volunteer position, whether it be at section leadership, district, region. All of those on the board are volunteers. We have day jobs. We're in the industry just like you. The only exception to that is we do have an actual IES staff. So we do have a headquarters in New York City. We have an executive director. These are paid positions, and they do report to the board for all the governance and all of the kind of strategic thinking moving forward.
And how active are you in this new search for an IES director?
So I actually happen to be on the executive search committee, and so we are actively looking for that new director. The first part of this was, as our existing director had stepped down, the first question we have to ask ourselves is, do we even need an interim executive director? And so there were pros and cons to both, but after evaluating it, we did decide yes. While we conduct our search, we did need, someone at the helm, at the staff level to make sure that our strategic mission and vision is being carried out, and giving our staff that foundation and that stabilization while we search for the new director.
Is that interim a potential new director, or is that he only wanted it just for the interim title?
That was part of the process. The interim is going to just be interim. And so as we conduct our new search, there will be a new batch of people that will raise their hand, and we'll have a very important decision to make that will guide and lead the IES for many years to come.
And what do you think, without going into real specifics, but what does that process look like, and when do you imagine that you'll have it filled?
So again, without getting into too many details, the general sense is that we do have an executive search committee. We are in the process of putting forward um, um, we're looking for an executive search firm, a third-party firm to conduct that search. They will, screen all the candidates. They'll basically get um, that short list of people to our committee, and from there we will go through and make the final selection. We anticipate, you know, uh, at least a 90-day process to make sure that we're getting this, conducted properly. And only at that time, when we feel comfortable, we'll have the new director take their place. So 90 days, it could be longer than that. We're not going to rush into this. The idea is that we get a person who fits the culture, who has, of course, the leadership abilities, and someone who's going to be able to carry out the strategic mission of the IES.
Good deal. Shifting gears, Mike, unless you want anything else on IES, I want to get to the NCQLP.
Mm-hmm.
Is this
That's where I wanted to go too.
another? Yeah, you're the outgoing exam committee chair. I assume another volunteer position for you?
It is, and quite honestly, as I realized that my role in IES was going to step up, I decided to step down from NCQLP, and many thanks to the leadership at Ncqlp Engineering, who has given their full support behind me. It wasn't fair of me to try to double dip on both of those, because they're both fairly exacting roles. So step down from NCQLP to kind of step up at IES. But it has been a very nice journey through NCQLP. Serving on the committee as a member for, I think I joined in 2010, and then stepped up as the exam committee chair. I believe it was 2016, I believe, when that happened. So it's been a very rewarding role, and it was time for someone else to take the helm. And it's been nothing but good things at NCQLP with respect to the people and um, affecting the certification process for the 3,000 plus LCs. It's been a rewarding experience.
Frank likes to work for free, Greg.
What do you want to do for us, Frank? We can find something.
I got a couple jobs real quick for you. Could fire off to you if you want. I think volunteerism has its limits, to be honest with you. And I think it's important that the IES has an executive director. I think, NCQLP, I think they're trailing right now, the industry. And I think they need to, there's something that body needs to get a fire lit there. And I don't know, I have no idea how to do it. But we need lighting certification now more than ever. We need that NCQLP to really get out there. What can they do? What should they do? Where are they at?
So, very astute observation. I could not agree more. As I step out of the role, really it was kind of the exam committee and the recertification committee. Those two committees are the lifeblood of the LC. Let me just say that you're absolutely right, and the LC being and certification in general being important to our industry, to our community. Anything we can do to provide value and to remind people, why are we doing this? Why are we submitting 36 LEUs every 3 years? Why are we taking this, killer 4-hour exam and stressing over it and studying and the exams and all of the prep? There is value there, and so I think what we can do better as an organization there is to to really ramp up the marketing efforts, to engage not only with our community but externally. we need to let people know that having that LC moniker behind your name, it means something. And it does help to
It used to mean a
differentiate
lot
from
more.
those.
It used to mean a lot more. I'm that's my just my perception. I'm not saying that, but I think a lot of the back in the day, GE, Philips, Sylvania were behind that program. Everyone was pushing in there and feeding into that. And there was a secret handshake, I think, when you got your LC and all these other things that, there was like a community there. And I think, like the way the IDA was decimated by the LED boom and just got pushed to the side and said, no, we're going in this direction. I think the same thing happened to the Ncqlp where the LED bulldozer just pushed them back. IES was in the same boat where, hey, we're not ready to move yet. We don't have a grab on this, but and the DLC came along and said, no, we're in charge. And this is what everybody has to make it to our standards. And I think what we're seeing is that pendulum start to swing back. In my mind, what I see, I think the Ncqlp needs to rebrand. I think they need to come out and redo I don't know if they need to redo it or just re-emphasize it, come out hot with a social media campaign, and really start to re-communicate with the lighting end users that the LC is where it's at, brother. The whole nailed program, LS1, LS2, all the stuff we're doing, LS Evolve, that leads you to the LC, and we talk about that all the time. But amongst the industry out there, you guys need to reassert your authority. You guys, the Ncqlp needs to come out hot, and let people know that this is the 2 letters in lighting you want after your name, whether you're an engineer, a designer, a distributor, a contractor. You need us. You need our certification. Come get it. Let's go now. I think you guys really need to get excited and branded and hot, and I don't know. I'm just excited thinking about it. I mean, I don't know. You guys need to announce that before, and then you set that goal, and then you say, okay, how do we get here now, guys? You know what I mean? We set it. Now, how are we going to do it? Put some pressure on yourselves. I think it's so important.
Mike, you must have been listening in on one of my conversations. I couldn't agree more. I'm very happy that Bernie Erickson over at FSG, he's now our the president of Ncqlp.
Nailed member.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, and Bernie and I had some conversations amongst other folks, and you're absolutely right. The time is now to reinforce LC's position within the community, and right now it is about the LC. There are other letters that have kind of tried to come up and I don't want to say compete, but maybe fill some gaps. So let's see what Ncqlp does. I've now officially stepped off as exam chair. I'm no longer my voice is no longer as prominent as it may used to be as of last month. But I appreciate you saying that, because yes, I do feel that the LC has a lot to offer. But if people lose that excitement, if they don't feel there's value in that, they're going to look elsewhere. And where are they going to go? You don't
need anybody's feelings. You need to strut like Conor McGregor walking in for a championship fight, brother. Get those arms moving. Just let everybody know that this is the certification. That's what we did with Nailed. I mean, when we started the podcast, nobody knew about Nailed. Nobody knew anything about it. But there's a lot of people in Nailed. I mean, Sid Phillips is on that board, Ncqlp as well, is he not?
Mm-hmm.
Another Nailed
yes,
guy?
He is.
Yeah. I mean, there's another Nailed
Yep.
guy there. So, I think it's time to, as much as lighting people don't want to do it and the volunteer organizations don't want to do it, you gotta speak to your level of credibility. There is no credibility higher in the lighting business than those 2 letters LC. That is the highest level of credibility you can get in the lighting industry, period, end of the story. All other certifications in lighting are secondary. Everything else is secondary. And I think Ncqlp needs to say that and scream it. And like I said, get those, what are you talking about, these other certifications? We are the certification. And we
Yep.
did that with Nailed. We came out and we said, look, this is the organization for distributors. If you're a distributor of lighting, you should join, and you're independent, you should join this association. And we're your voice. And Ncqlp should do the same thing. We're the voice of lighting professionals, people who are serious about this industry, that have qualifications in this industry. We are the place you need to come to get the credibility you need. And I can't say it's such an opportunity, but you could get overtaken, and by somebody could come in and steal it from you, and that would be a tragedy. From the Ncqlp, that is, not from Frank Agraz, of course.
Yeah, of course, and that is always kind of the lurking iceberg beneath. You just never know if and when. Some historically speaking, Ncqlp has been, I think, a little bit slower to move. For instance, I mean, we just last year moved to computer-based testing, and definitely a struggle to get to that point. I've been a champion of that, for years, and we finally, it's unfortunate that it took COVID to help move us in that direction, but we're there now. Anything we can do, from the board of directors, top down marketing, excitement, scream it from the rafters. I could completely agree with your Connor mentality, and so let's see what the board does. As it works out, the exam committee and the recertification committee, they serve at the pleasure of the board. So whatever they can do to initiate this, really the ball is in their court to move. So let's get in that ring and keep keep those LCs in there, and remind them how how much work that they've done, and what that really means to the community. I think it says a lot.
No, I have my LC, and I just got my email this morning about recertifying, so I'm going to be working on that. But how does the organization? I've been in lighting for 15 years. I do this podcast, but I still don't really get Ncqlp. Like, who's in charge? How does it structure? All the background behind it.
So I'll briefly mention that the board of directors at Ncqlp is really formed with these different kind of associations. So, for instance, the board of directors has a Ncqlp representative, an NILD representative, a representative from the IES and the DLC and NEMA. So it's really this consortium of different industry players who are then assigned a point of contact. And those are really the individuals that that set out the bylaws, that implement all of the kind of the strategic thinking, the marketing, things like that. There's also an Ncqlp Council, and again, these folks are designated based on their affiliation within the society. So on the council, you have members from the LRC, from NEMA, from NALMCO, from NYSERDA, and from the IS, and those folks are also involved. Think of them more as a kind of a board of nominations. They're there to help make sure that the board of directors positions are filled, and so they work hand in hand with the committees, such as the exam committee and the recertification committee. Those are the kind of the two, elephants that help the Ncqlp work.
Is there any employees of the Ncqlp, or is everybody volunteered?
Everyone, much like the IES, everyone is volunteer. They do have contracts in place to help administer all of the certificates, getting the recertification process. So there is a small staff that helps to process all that. So
Got it.
There's also the organization that administers the exam. I mean, that's the big one, right? The folks that have the test bank, the ones that administer the exam, the ones that have all the locations. So within that research, that candidate handbook, traditionally it had been those 30 some odd locations where you'd have to drive to take the exam. Now with computer-based testing, I think that number is closer to 2,000 locations. So if you live in a more of a rural setting, you wouldn't have to drive, 6 hours to Omaha or to, Chicago to take a test. So a little bit of a staff position, but mostly volunteer.
And is the IES any stronger than anybody else, or they just have a seat at the table? Is it a kind of a lead in by them saying we have to have this, or where did it come from? I guess maybe that's a bigger question. Who started
Okay,
it?
so good question. In the early 90s, there was an idea by the IES to have the certification, and it was actually called the TKE. That was a technical knowledge exam, I believe it what it was called. And that got launched out there. The IES in those days realized, hey, we probably need to separate this exam, this process, this administration. And so the Ncqlp was born. So I believe Ncqlp's first exam rebranded as an LC versus a TKE. I think the first exam was in 98, possibly 97. I may be off by a year. And so to answer your question, the LC was originally born out of the IES and got rebranded from TKE to LC. As far as IES's involvement today, we are just one voice on the council, on the board. IES does not run the Ncqlp. They have no, no additional interest or perspective. It's a completely independent thing. Although if you walk on Light Fair or these other conventions, at least my perception has been a lot of people think the IES runs the LC because we do have
That's the
a
perception
very
for sure.
prominent,
Mhm.
yeah, and it's having putting on my IES hat, I guess that's nice to be, to have that consideration. But other than running the exam prep course, which seems to be one of the more prominent ways to prepare for the LC, and also, by the way, most of the documents and references for the LC exam are all IES documents. So it's easy to understand why people would think the IES is Ncqlp, but that is not the case.
You don't need a TKE, brother. You need a TKO.
That's what I was thinking when I heard that too. I'm like,
And there's still some old timers you can find who still have their TKE. That may not be in their business card, but that's how you know if you were that geeky and into it in the mid '90s, you probably had your TKE.
Well, what's interesting? It's born out of the legacy lighting trade. That huge capital infrastructure in place from major manufacturers around the world. All of that got decimated by about 2015. And so now, it looks like Tokyo after the firebombing of 1945. Everything's gone. What do we have left standing? There's the Ncqlp. It should be standing out. It should be the beacon of light for the industry, in my mind. This is where you can actually learn real information and get a real certification. If you can pass this test, you're a badass in lighting. Let's go. Come on.
Right.
That's what it's like the bombing's done, everybody's gone, and there's like this one, the IES is there, and then there's the Ncqlp nailed, they're still there, and here's what's left. It's a huge opportunity to rebuild.
Right.
Rebuild with Ncqlp as the center of all certifications. All roads lead to Ncqlp. That's what I think we need to start acknowledging as an industry. Greg, Ehrich, come on, buddy.
I agree. Yeah, we talked about the stepping stones a lot with that, and that's what I wanted to ask too. So I did mine in 2010. I got my certificate on the wall, so I had to make sure. So I had to go to a test center. It was in November, I think, and you get your 4-hour time commitment. What does it look like now? Is it the same process other than online capability?
It's still 4 hours. You still have 180 items. You still have the 100 multiple choice. You've got the 16 case studies, each of them with five items per case study. And so the concept is still the same. I can tell you from the exam committee side, we have a very hardworking group, anywhere from 8 to 10 to 11 members, and we meet twice a year to review all of the content. And so many people may not realize this, but to be able to have a seat at that committee, you first have to go through a process of existing as an item writer. An item writer is someone who kind of serves the exam committee. These are the folks who help write the test questions. And it's not so much the final question for the final item, but it's the idea of an item. It's the kernel of an item. And so we ask all of our existing LCs who want to become and to help contribute, they first have to go to an item writer workshop. You just can't submit questions, right? You actually have to learn how to write test questions. You'd be amazed at the psychometrician, the statistical, all of the things that go into building a multiple choice item that's not tricky. Number two, it has to, in this case of the Ncqlp, it has to meet the minimum threshold, which is the minimum competency level of a 3-year-old lighting industry practitioner. Are they going to be able to answer this question? And that's the line in the sand that we draw as we develop these questions. If you'll notice, there are no items that are worded negatively, right? Nothing's designed to be tricky or even folks who are taking English as a second language. We try to focus on the content. Now, it might be ruthless, right? It might be something where if a salesperson or an agency rep takes the exam, there may be a question about controls or commissioning or the design process that they may not have the same level of knowledge. That's what makes the LC special. It is such a wide, diverse set of skill sets. And there's one more part to it too. Because the LC is so widely, the questions are so diverse, we have a job analysis. So every 5 years, we ask all of the LCs, we ask people from the lighting community, what are you doing in your job today? How do you work? What does your company do? And so that helps us to develop the question base so that it is targeting the engineers, the sales, the contractors, the architects, the installers, and everybody involved in the audit, design, commissioning, installation. We want to make sure that our exam fairly represents our constituents and our people within the community. So it is a constant evolving change. It's quite fascinating. I've been in this, going on 11 years now, so I've seen how the sausage is made. But it is quite a bit of to it with respect to how it's being made. So I encourage anybody who is an LC who wants to get involved, you can learn to become an item writer. And if after being on as an item writer for 6 months, 6 years, once a seat becomes available on the committee, that's where I kind of my role as the chair was to go to my item writer bullpen, tap the left arm and say, okay, a seat became available. I need a lighting designer on the West Coast who knows about controls. I'll look at my list of item writers. Okay, this person, time to come on and join. So it's a lot to work through. It's been a really good journey so far.
Ncqlp is an institution. Is that a good way to describe it? It's an institution, correct?
Sure.
The IES is an institution. The CDC is an institution. These are institutions. The Catholic Church is an institution. Institutions are designed in the establishment of an institution is to resist change. That's the purpose of them, right? That's why they're there to prevent change. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't adapt, right? Which is different. So when you're changing, you're kind of swinging. It's time to do something different. And so the Ncqlp is like, well, we don't do things different because we have a long history of graduates here, people that know the same thing, and we want to be sure, and we recertify them every year. So we don't like to change, but I think it does need to adapt. And from what I'm hearing from you is that it is, and adapts on a regular basis. The question is, how do we accelerate that adoption of this? How would that happen to where now, like I said, the Tokyo firebomb has gone off and the Ncqlp is still there. Now, how do they put that beacon of light on the top? What is it that they should do to let the industry know that this is the certification you want to have? How do you guys do that? Or how do they do that?
So great question. I think part of the Ncqlp's continued success and rebranding, regrowth is going to be to get the message out. I mean, how many of your viewers even knew that there was such thing as an item writer? How many
Sure.
people even knew
Right.
how to get on the committee? How many people knew that the committee even existed? Right?
How
Did
many
these
even know there's an
questions
LC? I'm not kidding
exactly?
you. I'm not kidding you with that. I mean,
Yeah.
Right,
there'd
right.
be a lot of people that are selling LEDs that listen to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. Be like, what? I already have my energy manager and my LS1 and whatever. I'm good. But
Right.
yeah, I would say that definitely communication is super important for NCQLP right now.
Yeah. And it all starts and ends with the board of directors. It is their charge to be proactive in maintaining the integrity of the LC. It's their job, as it is my job at the IES, to look forward, to see the trends, to see the hot topics, to get in front of uh, the slipping numbers or the rising numbers or whatever situation they're in. Um, being able to promote, being able to reassure that this is the credential to have.
And and thinking about, a lot of times Mike and I do stuff similar to this with Nailed. We just know you need to be part of it. Do we actually have to tell you why? What are the bullet points on why? LC, I know I should get it, and I got it, but why? And I'll give you one
Right.
example in my area, at least that where I can use it. Is there's a city in the Minneapolis market that when you do an outdoor lighting project, you have to have an LC sign off on the plan. So in the past, if my company wanted to do a project, we needed to find an LC to sign off on it, and sometimes we found it. Sometimes you had to pay for it, whatever it is. Now I can sign it. So there's one definable one. Is there other
Oh,
examples you can give us like that?
yeah, that's a good point. In the old days, I think it got changed, but there was a point in time when any work that was done by the GSA for the government, you had to have an LC as a to sign off the design. Um, one of the other um, efforts that failed was when EPACT was born. They were trying to make it so that an LC would be one of the approved signatories. Right now, you have to have a PE. And no disrespect to engineers, but having a PE doesn't mean necessarily that you know lighting.
There's no lighting engineers. There's no lighting
That's right.
engineers.
That's right. So, you're either a contractor in the jurisdiction where the project is installed or you're a PE. And so we felt that the LC was just the perfect instrument to help move that along. But anyway, lobbyists, government, not everything works out the way that you want. Just as you were talking, it was reminding me a point of how do we change, how do we adapt. During our exam committee session, there is, this has been for the last 6-7 years. The question always comes up, and we get comments from the people who take the exam. And by the way, we read every single comment that you put on there and have discussions about them. One thing that gets said a lot is, how come there aren't more LED questions on the exam? Why would I ever need to know anything about high pressure sodium or any other legacy
You don't. If
technology?
anybody asks that question, they got to go back to LS1 because you're not ready for the LC, bro.
Exactly.
If you're asking that question, man, you're not ready for this.
I'm preaching to the choir here, but
Yep.
the obvious answer is there are still existing conditions that are not LED. You're still going to find a mercury vapor, some sort of ceramic metal halide, plasma, induction. They're all out there. Just because you're not designing with them today in new construction doesn't mean that you don't need to know about them. So it's interesting.
All education So when people talk about education, all you're studying is history. Okay? So if you study physics, you're studying the history of physics. If you're studying mathematics, you're studying the history of mathematical development. That's all. People don't, they
Right.
seem to think that, no, I'm studying something new. It's no. We're studying the accumulated knowledge of X, Y, or Z. And so if you're going to take a degree in physics and get a PhD, you're going to become a physics historian. I hate to say that, but that's a better way to think about education. If you're getting an LC, you're going to study. You should have you should have a deep understanding of the history of electric light. Absolutely fundamental. You need to know how these sources work, why we use them, what their purposes were, and perhaps maybe it's time to re-reflect as an industry on why some of those sources, especially in the age of human-centric lighting, why some of those sources, what we didn't know about them and what we should know about them, particularly incandescent, its relationship to what do they call that? Infrared light, and how perhaps that's a very important human health aspect that can be incorporated in. Like, you're studying the history of anything when you're studying anything. It's history. So if people think they don't need to understand about incandescence and why halogen was an upgrade from incandescent, but very much the same thing, except an energy efficient upgrade and a color rendering upgrade, a color temperature difference, and all these little things that are different about these different sources, they don't understand. They don't want to be a PhD in lighting, which is basically what the LC is. It's like a practical PhD kind of certification in the lighting business. So if you have an LC, you should be able to go help some big contractor with lighting. You should be able to go work at a lighting design firm. You should be able to go and help engineers do their jobs. And in being able to do that, you have to understand the history of lighting. It's almost offensive if somebody
Right.
were to say that. It's like, you don't want to be educated in lighting then, if you don't want to know how high pressure sodium
Right.
or mercury vapor work. Sorry, I just had to rant there for a bit. I was hot,
No,
Greg.
no, you you bring up a very good point, and I think one of the as you're looking through this alphabet soup of credentials, in my mind, one of the things that really stands out is how wide focused the LC is. I should say not focused, right? It's an entire um, series of practitioners, and so you could be, in sales and engineer. It's designed for that general 3-year industry level lighting person, and so since it is so broad based, it almost acts like an umbrella versus other credentials that are very narrowly focused. If you're on the contractor side or want to learn, how to install controls, maybe you take something from Nalmco, or if you're gonna, get something from the American Lighting Association, or something from get your CLEP, for example, your CEM. There's all sorts of, or your CLD from IALD. The kind of, it's the lighting designer portfolio type of credential. In my mind, LC is the blanket that allows so many more people to be a part of it, knowing that that's any one thing may not be your specific specialty. Uh, Getting it tells the world that you know enough about that to participate in the credential.
What have the numbers looked like as of recent? I mean, I know last year was a tough one, maybe, but has it been staying steady in terms of people taking the LC, decreasing, increasing? Where are we at?
Those specific numbers. I'm not going to go into those types of. Not going to get into it specifically, but I just will, echo what Mike said earlier with as far as the perception of the LC.
Mhm.
I think anything we can do to increase our numbers is a good thing. So, yeah, there is always a good time for marketing. There is always a good time to get your name out there. Um, I think moving to computer-based testing is going to help. Obviously, COVID was a disaster for all of us, and um, it's not surprising that numbers have gone down. But the key is the recertification rate, which needs to stay high, and you still need to have new blood coming in, being those first time exam takers. That is key. So anything we can do to get the LC, moving even better. Anything that the board can do at Ncqlp to maintain the relationship with all the folks who have the credential, whether it be at Light Fair, Education, Light Show West, Strategies in Light. Maybe they could do their own podcast. Maybe they could shout from the rooftops, "Hey, be an item writer." There's a lot of room for improvement. So let's just hope that that they take your words of advice and start getting a little Connor on them. I like it.
Yeah, listen, man. I'll tell you, it's existential, because, and what I mean by that is you're at one of these. It's a what do they call that? With COVID-19, I said it was marked an epoch, Greg. Remember I said that to you in March when they locked down. I said this marks an epoch. Nothing will be different after this. And so, what are we, a year and a half into 15 days to stop the spread, right? Epoch time, right? So with Ncqlp, you can't lose. You can decline a little bit in new people taking the exam. You can blame it on COVID. You could say all this other stuff, and hey, you know what? But if you lose that installed base, if they start to lose faith in the LC, it's big trouble time for the industry, because there's nothing to replace it, and it's likely going to be replaced by Johnny Come Lately and the Lighting Marauders. They're going to come up with something. And I hate to call them that, but I think everyone knows that's what we called it on the show. If you listen, people that come into the lighting industry, we need to creative destruction and all these kinds of things on an industry that, there's a lot. Lighting is critical infrastructure, absolutely critical infrastructure for our society. It is at a level where it's militarily strategic. The Pentagon should be concerned about how the lighting in the electric light is working in their country, and as a militarily strategic item. If you can't keep your lights on, you can't fight a war. So how are you going to see? So you have all these issues around lighting. We need the Ncqlp to step up and to start strutting. And I don't know how you do it, but definitely you got the seam is open right now. Is it going to close? Right. Are you guys going to go through it? That's really the question. If you go through it, you should just start swinging like Connor, Greg. But Frank Agraz, I think we've gone almost over 45 minutes. We try to keep them to that. Any final thoughts for the listeners?
No, I appreciate everyone tuning in. I'm happy to be able to talk about Ncqlp and IES, two institutions that are close to my heart. We always encourage those who do have extra time to volunteer, right? It's, the way I see it, it's about giving back. I've been in this industry more than 25 years. I got started in the early 90s. And all of that knowledge, I feel it's my duty to help give back, to mentor, through governance, through strategy. To your point, Mike, of this is all a history lesson, right? And those who have had the history, let's share that with our newbies, with the rookies, and all of the bright minds that are coming up, so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, right? You bring in a new technology, and let's not repeat the dimming fiasco of compact fluorescent, right? Let's learn, let's educate our customers, and let's be there for each other as we move through the space and connect with our.
Do you know what that's called? That's interesting. We brought up that the Ncqlp is an institution. What you're talking about there is a word, very, 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 words got a little credit. What you're talking about is the culture. So a culture, what a culture does is passes on information to new people. That's all culture does. So what is the culture of the lighting industry? If the culture of the lighting in the last 10 years, when I started in lighting at Nailed, everybody, well, you go to a Nailed, everybody wants to help you. They're trying to pass knowledge on to you. They're trying to teach you trade secrets. And it's actually really unbelievable how much Greg and I learned from Nailed. It's really unbelievable how, and it's all soft knowledge. It's all talking to other people, meeting new people in your field. But that's what Nailed had a culture. And the LED boom smashed those cultures really hard. There's new people entering it that knew everything. I'm doing quotations for the listeners. They knew everything about lighting. They just everything needs to be ripped down here and destroyed and replaced with creative destruction in Silicon Valley. No, critical infrastructure we're talking about, brother. You can't come in here and just smash everything apart and hope for the best. So the culture of the NCQLP must remain that of passing on knowledge to the next generation. That's what the IES does. It passes on knowledge. It develops new knowledge, but through volunteer committees in the industry, and then passes that knowledge on and distributes that knowledge out. And the NCQLP is the gatekeeper to say, you know the knowledge, or you're proficient in the knowledge, or you're not, and every year it checks to make sure that these people are proficient. And so, Frank, I'm going to thank you for coming on the show. There's my little spiel at the end. But, Greg, before we go, come on, man. We got to go with they do the light thing, they do the right thing. The gangsters down at SATCO, SATCO.com, Greg Ehrich.
Right, talking about history and lighting, they've got it all.
Ooh.
And they've got all the legacy sources. They got the new sources. They know everything there is to need to know about lighting. So check them out. Get them on your line card, if that's a word we use anymore. Sell their product.
You know, SATCO is a history lesson. So go to SATCO.com. That's right. They do the light thing. They do the right thing. And, of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, where I learned everything I know now. And, of course, Greg Ehrich as well. You can start your path to the LC with Nailed. That's right. Just go to nailed.org and sign up for LS1. That's the right place to begin any lighting career. Start it with LS1. That is built by Paul Hafner, RIP Paul. Love you, brother. I know you're listening up in heaven right now to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. But then you go to your LS2 with Nailed. That's right. So LS1 and LS2 are prepping you for that LC, and then you're ready to take the exam, brother. So go to naild.org. That's right. We're in alignment with the NCQLP. We love those guys. And at the end here, we always say we love you guys and gals out there that listen to the show. Thank you for listening. Talk to you next time. Bye for now.